Welcome to the Daily Happy QuickCast, and today we have a special guest, and which means it's not going to be as quick because we're going to have a conversation here. And so, your usual 5-minute podcast is going to be a little bit longer. So who am I sitting here with right now?
All right. My name is Margaret Archer.
Dr.
Margaret Archer.
Yes.
I don't like to say that because I don't prescribe hypertension medication, but
that's fair. That's fair.
That's fair. So I'm a pelvic floor physical therapist. I am the owner of Arrow Physio.
Amazing.
And my company, I see virtual and in people's homes and women's homes for pelvic floor physical therapy.
Nice. So, gentlemen, if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking this isn't for you, that's not true. This episode still is for you. It's for everyone because you need to have that knowledge and you need to be able to have that information. So stick around because we're going to talk about a lot of good stuff, got a lot of good questions.
Sure.
And I'm really excited about this just because it's something that needs to be talked about more and more. So let's talk about it. So my first question would be what is the pelvic floor and why is it so important for women's health? And you can elaborate on men's health with that as well.
Yeah, great question. And to go back on that, men do also have pelvic floors and men do have pelvic floor dysfunction. So if you're a man and you're experiencing pelvic floor dysfunction, there are awesome providers out there for you. I am not one of them. I just see women, but I can definitely connect you with somebody that's great that sees men. So when we talk about the pelvic floor specifically, I like to first zoom out and think about the core as its entirety. So our core canister is the fancy term I'll use. So if you think about our core canister, liken that to a soda can, a Coke can analogy. So with the soda can, we've got the top, the bottom, and then a wrapping around the side. So the soda can provides stability and stiffness. And so that's the same thing with our core canister when we're thinking about our muscular support, as well as our ability to use air to provide stiffness and stability to our spine to make us able to move throughout our life, but also be able to lift things when we want to lift them. So top part being our diaphragm, which is this beautiful dome-shaped muscle like this that sits right up underneath our ribs.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Got it.
And then we've got our abs on the front. So we've got our rectus abdominis, our obliques, and then our transversus abdominis, which are making up our core. We've got some beautiful back muscles on the back, including our lats. And then our pelvic floor is the bottom of that Coke can. So our pelvic floor, show for the camera.
For those on video, we actually have a pelvic floor here.
Here we go.
Harvested it this morning.
And this is a female pelvic floor because it has 3 holes.
There you go.
So pelvic floor is a group of muscles that is sitting between our pelvic bones. So right now we are looking at somebody from the front. So this would be somebody laying on their back. This is the tailbone here. We've got our pelvic bones on either side. And you can appreciate there's a big group of muscles sitting at the bottom. Again, if we put our person standing up, our pelvic floor is sitting and supporting the base of our core canister. So our pelvic floor has lots of muscles. It has 2 layers, superficial and deep. So you can appreciate the superficial is right here, and I'll take it off in just a minute. But the superficial's layers, its role is to help with sexual arousal and function, as well as maintaining continence. So you can see we've got our 3 holes. So urine's coming out of here. This is our vaginal opening, and this is our rectum. So superficial layer we can see has the way that the fibers are running. You can see are kind of in a circular motion. The reason that we have that is their role is to close holes. So you can see circle. So when they contract, hole gets smaller, we close off. So that's the superficial layer. If we take off the superficial layer, handy dandy.
Yeah, that is pretty handy.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so deep layer here. So we can appreciate how the fibers are running. So if we look at our tailbone here, you can see how they're running in this fan sling-like position here. Their role is to support our pelvic organs. So if I'm the pelvic floor out here and I go to contract, I contract and I'm lifting and supporting. So if we flip our little pelvis guy back up now, our pelvic bowl is sitting like this. So when we contract, it is supporting our pelvic organs from below.
So it's basically like the foundation of everything with your upper body.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty dang important.
Yes, we like the pelvic floor.
And often not talked about for whatever reason. I don't know, people get embarrassed by it or they don't want to talk about it, but it's important. The slab in your house has to be solid in order for your house to not fall apart. I mean, this is essentially the foundation of your body.
Totally. Yeah. And so commonly a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction can be from if we have somebody that has a lot of chronic back pain, hip pain, pelvic pain, it can be from the pelvic floor. So it's important to know that if you're getting treatment for something like that and it's not getting better, it potentially could be your pelvic floor.
Yeah. Or if you've tried all sorts of things except the pelvic floor, then that could be something that, we're reaching out to you, reaching out to a different provider, whoever can like actually properly help you with that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of info, but that's also very good info.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And I think we talked on the functions of the pelvic floor. So we'll talk about those functions. So we talked about helping to maintain our pelvic organs. So for a woman, we have bladder, uterus, and then rectum, kind of in this order. So rectum closer to your back, and then the bladder near the front, and the uterus is hanging in the middle. For a man, everything but the uterus, right? So the pelvic floor is supporting those pelvic organs, and then if you're pregnant, supporting your baby. Helping with sexual function, orgasm, and arousal, and then also helping to pee, poop, and pass gas when we want to, and not when we don't want to.
When we want to.
When we want to. Ideally, when we want to. Yes.
Okay, cool. So then, like, I mean, for the most part, I know the majority of ladies are going to be wanting to listen to this, but like, how does pregnancy and childbirth affect the pelvic floor?
Great question. So pregnancy affects everything, right? But yeah, I mean,
literally everything.
Literally everything. Yeah, for the men that are listening out there, you know everything,
yes.
right? Yeah, so pregnancy can affect all parts of our body. So our cardiovascular system, our skin, our pelvic floor is no different. So as we go through pregnancy, obviously there's a lot of...
Pregnancy is so wild.
It's wild. It's
so
the most
wild.
crazy experience.
Yeah.
But it's preparing you for the crazy postpartum and being a parent experience too, maybe.
Yep. Maybe you're never actually ready
No.
for it, but it does do a good job of like getting you mostly ready.
Yeah, it tries. So during pregnancy, we have a lot of changes that are happening to our body, including a lot of postural changes that are happening. So as we get larger with having a baby.
Real quick, let's do this like that.
Sure.
Just so that way, in case the internet gods see that and they're like, flag is inappropriate, we can do that.
Fair enough.
Like that. Yep. Okay.
Perfect.
Anyway, keep going with what you're saying.
So as we have postural changes, we're growing a baby, we're getting bigger, we start to have changes in our musculoskeletal system. So that can result in tightness, strength deficits, range of motion deficits. All those things can kind of pop up during pregnancy, which is why sometimes we will see pelvic floor and core dysfunction. So the percentage of women that suffer from incontinence, so accidentally peeing themselves when they don't want to, goes higher during pregnancy. And part of that is the changes that are happening to the musculoskeletal system. So that's during pregnancy. There's a lot of changes that are happening with that. And then specifically with birth, which was your other question,
Correct,
right?
Yeah.
So obviously we know that birth is a wild experience.
And, like bodily traumatic experience.
Correct.
No matter what kind of birth you
it doesn't
give.
matter.
Yeah,
it's
doesn't matter.
wild. It's wild. Whether it's coming out your belly or coming out your vagina, it's a wild experience. So when we're thinking through having a baby, the impact on our body, obviously there's a lot of impacts, but we'll speak specifically about the core and pelvic floor. So one of the myths that is very common is that if you had a C-section, you don't need pelvic floor physical therapy.
I heard someone literally say that the other day. They said, I don't need to worry about my pelvic floor because I had a C-section.
Wrong.
Like wrong.
Yeah,
You still carried the kid.
Correct. For months.
For months.
For months. Yes. Yeah, for months. So yes, now you can know that you can gently correct that.
We will subtly correct. Subtly and gently
It'd be
correct.
like, interesting point that you have.
Interesting point. You're wrong.
Yeah. So women, regardless of how they are delivering, there are definitely changes that happen to our body. We'll speak specifically about vaginal birth just because the impacts on the pelvic floor are a little bit more significant.
Sure.
So when somebody is delivering vaginally, our tissues have to lengthen around 300%.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot for a muscle.
That is a lot for a muscle. So one, it's amazing. It's amazing that our body is able to do that to bring a child into this world.
Yeah, like we can, like, it's amazing just in general, all the things that happen going into it. But yeah, 300% lengthening is
a lot.
Wild.
Yeah, that's a lot. So like the percentage of women that experience tearing and trauma during birth is very high. So first time moms, it's usually somewhere between 80 and 90% of women have some sort of tearing. I like to share that because people are like, I don't want to tear. And you're like, understand, but let's not be scared of it because it is fairly common.
And what I'm really excited about talking with you more on this, and if you don't want to listen to that, I think you should, but like we're going to talk about these things today because it needs to not be taboo. It needs to not be something that people need to be embarrassed about. Like, let's talk about this stuff and normalize it so that way we can normalize getting pelvic floor therapy.
For sure.
Or normalize like talking about how it hurts during intercourse or whatever. So if you get really upset by that, sorry, this ain't the right show for you. because we're gonna talk about it.
Correct. But if you bump into that, now you know.
Now you can come back, bookmark this for later. It'll be fine.
And you're with other people. Like, you're not alone, which is cool. So we have this big stretch that's happening, right? So we have this stretch injury that's happening to our pelvic floor, to those tissues, and to those muscles. And so when we think about muscles, they really love to be in certain ranges of motion, right? So if we think about our bicep is strongest in the midpoint, right? So you're not the strongest up here. You're not the strongest where it's fully lengthened. Somewhere in the midpoint is where you have the most output. That's the most effective. So when we think about our pelvic floor, when you have this significant lengthening and stretch injury, our tissues, and again, it's normal after birth because we have passed a baby through it. Our tissues are overly lengthened, and their ability to recruit and fire because they're in this lengthened state is less. And so that's why it's very common for women immediately after the delivery in the first few weeks to experience some form of incontinence, some pelvic heaviness, because those tissues aren't able to do their functions, which we talked about as being closing holes, helping support our organs. And so I love to encourage women on that because it can feel really scary if you've never experienced pelvic heaviness or incontinence.
Totally.
And then you bump into it and you're like, am I going to deal with this for the rest of my life?
Well, and some people kind of are.
Yeah.
Because they're still not taking the correct steps to get things fixed.
Yes, because things can be fixed. And unfortunately, a lot of women are don't know that. It's normalized.
Well, that's just the way it is now. Yeah. Ugh, God.
You've had a baby. You'll pee your pants when you laugh for the rest of your life.
Don't even worry about running. You're just going to pee yourself the entire time.
Why would you run? You could just do
you could just not
stretch. I don't know.
Yeah. Ugh, no. I'm excited about people, providers like you and places like us that are, saying, no, that's not normal. Let's get this fixed and taken care of. So I think that's going to help women for, we're trying to do our part here.
Yeah.
And you are too.
Empower. Let's do it.
Let's empower people. Hello.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. I do that a lot.
No, that's great. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I want to talk about with the birth process. I mean,
that kind of leads into my next question, which is what are some of the most common pelvic floor issues that you see?
Great question. So there's primarily, I would group them into probably 4. So first being incontinence. So that's the fancy word for accidentally peeing, pooping, or passing gas when you don't want to. So incontinence is very common, as well as pelvic heaviness or prolapse. So again, that's kind of a sensation of heaviness in your pelvic region, or even having a bulging of tissue and organs near your vaginal opening.
That can't feel good.
No.
That cannot feel good.
Yeah, and that's scary too. But again, it can be treated. Awesome. Love. So we've got those 2, and then pelvic pain. So that can be either just pain in your pelvic region, hip, back, that kind of thing, but also specifically pain in your genital region. So that is also fairly common postpartum. Also goes up in menopause as well. So we see changes with unfortunately having pelvic pain, so pain with intimacy, either with just touch to that region with initial insertion or with deep penetration. So somebody can have some of that, all of that. So that's something that I treat as well. And again, is incredibly common. The stats is 10 to 20% of women deal with pain with intercourse.
That's pretty common.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
and
not a one-off situation.
No, it's not. And so I think, again, not normalizing, but bringing to front the conversation about it so that women can get the access to services that they need and know that that's not normal and they don't have to live with that.
100%.
Yeah. And 100%. Then the last one being core weakness. So traditionally people would say diastasis recti, which is I feel a super buzzword when people are trying to get you to buy a postpartum programming thing, but core weakness. I'll put that as core weakness instead of diastasis.
There you go. Perfect. So run down the 4 again real quick.
So we've got incontinence, so accidentally pee, poop, or pass gas when you don't want to. Pelvic heaviness or prolapse. We had pelvic pain, and then core weakness.
Perfect. 4 most common things. And then how does someone, if someone's listening right now and they're kind of nodding along, or they're going, oh yeah, that happens, or if a guy is listening and he goes, oh yeah, my wife said that, how can women really identify if they have a pelvic dysfunction? Great
question. So when we're thinking incontinence side, so again, if you're having any leaking, you sneeze, cough, laugh, jump.
Yeah, that one's pretty obvious.
Yeah. You pee yourself.
You pee yourself.
You pee yourself, or you're passing gas, or you have poop come out when you don't want to. So that's pelvic floor dysfunction for sure. Chronic constipation, chronic diarrhea are both ones that are within the pelvic health space,
Really?
which is very interesting.
Because I would initially look at that and go, oh, there's something going on with nutrition or
Both.
gut or, okay. Both.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
it's really kind of tag teaming together.
I guess because, diarrhea and that can be stress. So if your pelvic floor is under constant stress, is that kind of where it's going from with that?
So it also comes with the ability for the pelvic floor to be able to contract and fully lengthen when it wants to. So if I'll go to the flip side of it's
literally
always
learning
contracted.
things here today. This is awesome.
I know, so fun, right? So our pelvic floor, we talked about how it has a sling, right? So when it contracts, it should lift up. So it contracts and it's lifting. So it's lifting and holding closed. So if somebody is living their life with their pelvic floor constantly contracted and they can't lengthen and open those holes, it's going to be really hard to get poop out. So they're going to be potentially, and again, the nutrition side comes very, very heavy on the side.
Sure.
But if they are constantly contracted, trying to get poop out, they're going to be bearing down. That might result in hemorrhoids. So that's where the pelvic PT side comes from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And we should talk about it.
We should talk about it. Yeah, we should know more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so definitely those. We talked about the incontinence, having weakness, pelvic. I feel like pelvic heaviness is something that people kind of miss a lot.
Sure.
I feel like the incontinence side, you'd be like, oh yeah, pee my pants. I should probably do something about that. But this deep throbbing heaviness kind of feeling, that would be an indication that something is going on with your pelvic floor.
Yeah, that'd be that's a tough thing to just live with all the time.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
and specifically on returning to exercise, if that is something that you're desiring,
or just anything you want to by living a pain-free life.
Correct. Yeah, lifting your toddler and not being my insides feel like they're gonna fall out. That would be
that's brutal.
Yeah, it's not fun. That's hard.
No, not fun. Okay, so decently, if you nodded along with any of those or you checked the box with any of those, that's a sign that you should reach out to someone.
Totally.
Okay, cool. And so, we talked about how we're trying to help and we're doing that. What role does strength training play with, supporting pelvic floor health or what? And what are some of the, dangers of strength training as well whenever we're with pelvic floor dysfunction? What would you recommend?
Great question. So how much time do you have?
We have all the time. We have all the time in the world. Look,
So-
it's just us here. What
Yeah,
are we doing?
3 hours, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. The world needs another 3-hour podcast for
So
sure.
let's talk on first the benefits of strength training.
Yep.
So we'll go there first. So one thing, nobody woke up and was like, my life would be so much easier if I was weaker. Right? Let's just talk about that in general.
Do you need me to soapbox right now? Because I will soapbox.
Right.
No one is ever strength is never a weakness, period.
Correct.
And everyone always wishes that they were stronger. So
yeah.
Let's get stronger.
Yes. Which is places like y'all are doing that.
Yeah.
Which is awesome.
And even if you're well, I love running. Cool. Awesome. Also strength training.
Correct.
Right. Well, I love doing yoga. Great. I love that too. Strength training.
It's an and, not an or.
It's an and, not an or. We don't have to be in just this single modality identity.
For sure.
This is what I do. No, we can do. It's a yes and situation. Exactly. All right. I'll stop soapboxing. I'll let the expert take it.
I'll share on the soapbox.
There
too.
we go.
So specifically for thinking pelvic floor. So if we go back to the idea that our pelvic floor muscles are muscles, right? Just like other parts of our body.
We can train it. Yeah.
And they can get better. And a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with dysfunction wise can get better if those areas are not only stronger, but they're able to move in the range of motion that they want to move. So if we're thinking through how does strength training, let's say at a gym, impact your pelvic floor, there's a really cool study that came out that looked at glute strength. So the intervention was glute strength. They were doing resistance training and seeing its impact on stress urinary incontinence. So stress urinary incontinence being, again, that example of you sneeze, cough, laugh, and you have a leaking of urine.
Have a little accident.
A little accident. Something happens.
A little whoopsies.
A little whoopsies, yes. So they did not do any specific pelvic floor muscle strengthening. They just strengthened the glutes.
Train their glutes.
Just glutes. And the urinary incontinence got better.
Squats, hitting their lunges, hitting their deadlifts, just training their glutes.
And the urinary incontinence got better, which is amazing.
Well, shoot, we're doing great.
Right?
That's
it's awesome. So the hypothesis on that, which makes sense, is our pelvic floor, again, if we look at the position in the pelvis, and we think about our glutes, all right? Our glutes are these big, happy, hopefully big, happy muscles sitting
big
right
old
here,
butts.
Right?
Yep.
Big old butts sitting here. So if our pelvic floor, or if our glute muscles are weak, you can see how the pelvic floor muscles are attaching onto other parts of the pelvis.
Right.
So they are like, it's fine, glutes. I'll just hold on for dear life. I've got it. I'll be our stability.
So they're just like constantly stressed and overstimulated at all times.
And they're like, it's okay. I'll hold. I got it.
And if you're stressed and overstimulated, you can't grow or get stronger.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any time to rest or turn off.
Exactly. And so then
it's like a metaphor for life too.
Your pelvic floor is a metaphor for your life.
Stop having so much anxiety, pelvic floor.
Exactly.
We have a moment
Just
right
breathe
now.
and make your glutes bigger.
Just breathe.
It'll be fine. So when the glutes got stronger, that allowed the pelvic floor to do what it needed and wants to do, right?
Yeah.
So it can get in that beautiful range of motion of being able to contract and relax to be able to do what it needs to do. And then it's able to meet the pressures from a sneeze, a cough, a laugh without leaking. So
interesting.
I mean, that's just a great argument of like, we should have stronger bodies so our pelvic floor is also happier.
Yeah, if like when you get stronger, every part of your body is happier.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, done.
Yeah, that's
Podcast
one reason.
over.
Exactly. We'll die on this hill. It's fine. My other side on that is like the things that are coming for us all, like gravity and age are coming, right? Mm-hmm. Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're a woman, menopause is coming too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeesh.
Yeah, that's a big red flag. But
Yeah.
also it's something you can't avoid. Like
Correct.
It's happening.
But can you be stronger going into those things? Yes.
1,000%. We talk about that all the time. Like, you know, I'm a fan of Peter Attia and his centenarian decathlon thing, which is, in the last 10 years of your life, what do you want to do? What do you want to be able to do? Well, training for that stuff starts now.
Correct.
Right? Like if you want to be able to put your suitcase in the overhead compartment of an airplane without any assistance, you need to start pressing overhead often now, because it doesn't matter how in shape you are, how much you work out, like you will lose muscle mass, you will lose, neurological capabilities, you will lose the ability to produce force. So while we're young and we can do it, like, let's do it.
Absolutely. And set that reserve high, right?
Yes.
So that when you're doing this stuff throughout your life, you're not having to do your 1 rep max to put the suitcase overhead. You have reserve, right?
Exactly.
And that's the same thing when we're thinking through pelvic floor dysfunction is if our 1 rep max for our pelvic floor is 15 pounds and we go to pick up our 20-pound toddler,
Bang.
There's leaking, right? Yeah. It comes because we've hit our reserve. We've hit our capacity. So if we're training above that, then our body is ready to meet the demands we're putting on it.
Right. Like if you've never squatted above 135, it would be silly to put 155 on the bar. Right. So, and that's a really good analogy of like 1 rep maxing your pelvic floor.
Yep.
Crazy. You're blowing my mind right now. Dr. Margaret, this is crazy.
And so your flip side was questions of what is not safe, right?
Yeah. Like if you're training and you're noticing these things, like what's not safe?
Great question. One, hate the word unsafe exercises.
Yeah, because every exercise has a purpose and can be safe if loaded correctly and all that stuff.
There you go.
Yeah.
Love.
See,
you're on the hill.
Listen,
we're here. We got this.
We understand things. Okay. Like it's so funny. We use Jefferson curls in the warm-ups all the time just to really warm up backs. I would never see anyone doing like heavy Jefferson curls, immediately, but you can train Jefferson curls to be really, really heavy. And they're an amazing exercise. If you see someone doing that, you're like, you're going to die because your back is all rounded. Like, no, you can lift heavy with the rounded back as long as you have progressively overloaded to it.
Absolutely.
And I feel like you're about to jump in with something.
I was like, that's the same thing with the pelvic floor.
Yes,
See above.
I got it.
See above. Yeah. So when it comes to safe versus unsafe exercise, postpartum, but also like throughout our entire life, specifically, let's go postpartum first.
Sure.
So if we're thinking postpartum, like if somebody is like, what is a safe exercise for me? I'm going to give the like worst PT answer, which is it depends. Right. So it depends.
I wrote a blog post yesterday and I said like, it depends. It depends.
Yeah. And it does, right?
Yeah.
Because postpartum, it matters what you are coming into that postpartum period with, right? So if your fitness level during pregnancy, let's say you were able to strength train up until 2 weeks before you had your baby, you had minimal pelvic health symptoms, you are otherwise healthy, you have a delivery with minimal tearing, and you have like a great support from your husband, baby's sleeping kind of well-ish.
You're in a unicorn situation.
Yeah,
right?
you're in a unicorn situation, and
must be nice.
Yeah, I was like, no, I wasn't one of those. But that person may be able to get back to certain exercises quicker, right?
Sure.
Versus somebody that, let's say, they had to stop running week 6 of their pregnancy because they were so nauseous.
Right.
They have 3 other kids. They were induced and ended up having, labored for a while, then had a C-section, and they're trying to manage all of their kids now.
Had a not ideal pregnancy, delivery.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So like that person's ability to accept load and to perform is going to be different because of what they're bringing into that situation.
It's like we talk about it in the gym a lot, like people's training age. You know, like if you are brand new, like super green, never worked out before, we're going to go light for a long time, right? We're going to go light for a long time until you develop that coordination, until you get the reps. You know, it'd be super irresponsible for us to be like, everyone can lift heavy. Let's just try a max right now. Like, dumb.
Yep.
Right. And so I didn't think about that when it comes to like postpartum though. Like, how long were you able to train while your body was going through craziness? Like, it's going to take even longer to get back. And that's okay.
Exactly. And that's also the push for, we need to not be making people fearful during pregnancy of exercise.
Yeah.
Because then
Sorry, I almost soapboxed. I almost soapboxed.
I'll do my own soapbox.
You go.
So, I mean, we don't need to decondition women for potentially one of the hardest periods of their life, right?
Thank you.
It's a terrible idea.
I mean, I feel so out of place sometimes, like being a man, being like, keep lifting, even though your doctor said no. Like, but anyway.
Yeah.
I'm
with you on that.
I get very frustrated by that.
I mean, the postpartum period is hard enough. It's way harder if you're also deconditioned.
Yeah.
Right? Like you already feel bad.
Yeah.
And you don't need to also have like dropped all of your strength training and only done like gentle stretching for 9 months. Like that's
go for walks.
It's not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah. So what would you say to a lady right now who, you know, might be 10 to 12 weeks postpartum, who is still like feeling pretty, you know, not herself, but she wants to get back to it. She doesn't know where to do or what to start, what to do. Like, what would you say to someone like that who is like, let's say that she trained all the way up until the middle of her third trimester. Like, what's her best bet?
Great question. So one, I would want to know what her goals are, right? So like, what are you coming in with a desire to? Is it to get,
what are your expectations?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, is it somebody that's like, I want to run a marathon in 2 months? Hey, maybe we need to have a conversation about goal setting, right? Like, love that.
Yeah.
Let's start with some smaller goals first.
Pump the brakes a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah. What is your ability to be able to train? What does that look like for you? Like during the day, do you have 5 minutes to do exercise? Do you have an hour? Right. How many days a week does that look like for you? Because that's going to change the way that I'm going to also provide education for their home exercise program, because I don't want to give a new mom something that's so stressful that she can't do it.
Yeah. I was talking about that with a training client of mine that says, you know, she wants to do 5 workouts a week. Okay, well, is 5 workouts a week actually going to make you more unhealthy? Because now you're really stressed. You're not recovering. You're sore all the time. And like some people can train 5-6 days a week, 8 sessions a week, 10 sessions a week, and it's fine, but they have the ability to recover. They have low stress. They don't have a toddler hanging on them at all times. Like it's so very individualized and unique.
100%. Yeah. And to your point, like, there's so many factors that play into that besides just the exercise piece, right? It's like, is that person also trying to like actively lose weight really fast and like their nutrition status is really poor?
Because you're not going to recover well if you're in a calorie deficit.
Correct. Yeah. So like there's so much education and understanding the whole person to help us drive what's the like initial programming going to look like for that person.
It's so tough because like especially in the social media world and everything, like people always want to say, well, this is what that person did, so I should be able to do that too. But you only see 1 to 2% of what's going on there. Like you have to have like a real understanding of what is happening with you and your life every day before you can say, this is the goal that I actually want to do and what I actually want to achieve.
Actually, yeah.
Everyone is so different.
Yeah. And giving yourself grace that like how you like returned in your postpartum period from your first baby might look really different from your second or your third.
Oh yeah.
And so knowing that recovery piece can be very different, not only between people, but also in yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And giving yourself grace along the way. I think that's like I would say one of the 2 of my like biggest things is, one, if you have symptoms, you're not alone. It's not normal, but it's common. And 2, we need to give ourselves grace as we are going through this recovery process, because you're under a lot of different tensions and stress, and it's beautiful because it's life, but it also, we need to give ourselves grace.
I mean, I think that we can always, like, especially with giving ourselves grace, like extending our timelines to like everyone wants it done right away. They want to be back fast. They want to, achieve everything so quickly. But if we just extend our timelines out, like that doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make anything bad. Like it actually gives you more time to achieve the things, and you're going to be happier along the way.
Yep.
Because you're not under as much stress.
And you're celebrating your small wins, right? Versus like losing at the big thing because you set it up here. Like, can we set some small targets? Again, hey, you don't have time to exercise for an hour, but amazing, you did 2 5-minute sessions. And like for a new mom, that can feel
that's such a big win.
It's a huge win, but it can feel so overwhelming of like, how do I work in the time for exercise? And you're like, 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
And then that's all I need to do.
Can't make it to the gym today, 10-minute walk.
Great.
There you go. That's great.
Yep.
And I know earlier we said, walking isn't enough in pregnancy. Obviously not, but in certain situations, like everything is so different.
Yep.
Right. And so like we can't just constantly compare ourselves to everyone else because your situation is unique.
Of course.
We get along.
Yeah, this is good.
We get along.
We have similar soapboxes.
Great. There's another one of me out there.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to say with the time thing too, like it doesn't help whenever you see 20 somethings without kids telling you like no excuses, get to the gym, train hard. Like that is the most garbage BS out there. Like there are very valid excuses, right? There are very valid reasons why someone can't get to the gym and train hard that day. And a lot of times it's actually very, very good for them not to go to the gym that day. If you are stressed as hell and you're underslept and you are undernourished, going to the gym and trying to train hard is dangerous.
Correct.
I try to tell some of our early morning clients too, like 5 days a week at 5 a.m. is cool, but you're sleeping 6 hours a night. Like maybe we do 3 days a week at 5 a.m. and 2 days a week you sleep in a little bit more. And the people that do that oftentimes will see bigger results because they're rested. Their body can recover.
And that's same with pelvic floor symptoms, right? As like if you had a day, or let's say last night baby slept for 45 minutes total, you're under a ton of stress because you've got a deadline at work.
It's not going to be a good day.
No, yeah. You ate a donut. Like you shouldn't be surprised or scared when you pop into your pelvic floor symptoms because, hey, those muscles are tired just like every other part of your body, right?
Yeah.
Like you feel bad.
The parasympathetic nervous system is just like firing on all cylinders.
Other way.
Damn
sympathetic. You're close.
Sympathetic nervous system. See, this is why I don't talk out of my ass whenever there's a doctor around. I just need to know because that's embarrassing.
You're good.
I thought I had it. Okay.
You learned something new. It's fine.
I'm learning a lot today. This is actually really fun. Okay, let's get back to my questions before we get on more soapboxes. We already did that. Oh yeah. How long does it typically take for a pelvic floor to recover?
You want my it depends again?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Hit me with it.
So there is like a funny little saying, which I do think is kind of helpful, is it takes 9 months to make a baby. It takes 9 months to recover from a baby. So with that, I give the caveat, it depends again. So we're thinking through what is recovery for you, right? Is that getting back to deadlifting a certain amount, or is that just
your goal?
Are you just wanting to be able to play with your toddler without having heaviness? So it depends. We're thinking through again, what is the fitness level you're bringing into that postpartum period, and what is the support that you have to be able to achieve the goals that you want to.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't.
So I'm sorry, there's not an answer. I wish that I could.
I wanted it to be 45 days.
I know. And that's the hard thing with like social media will sell you on that is like
100%.
You'll have your core back in 10 weeks if you do these 5 exercises, and that's not true.
And she has 1 million followers, so she must know what she's talking about.
And she also didn't have a baby, but whatever. It's fine.
that little bit.
Yeah.
God, I hate them. I hate them all. You don't even know how much I hate influencers, but now you do.
Well, they're being influenced now.
Ugh. I know. Whoops. I've become what I wanted to destroy. Okay, let's talk about this one. What myths and misconceptions do you often encounter about pelvic floor? Since like I heard you talking earlier, like pelvic floor is you're getting a lot of buzzwords out there, a lot of social media stuff, a lot of everything. People are becoming more aware of the pelvic floor, but we know that whenever something becomes more aware, there starts to be more misconceptions and myths. So like, what are the biggest ones that you see?
So we talked about the safe and unsafe. We'll table that one.
Right.
That's its own thing. And then the thing about C-section, not needing pelvic floor rehab, table that one. We've got those. One that I think is kind of funny is people saying that they're training their pelvic floor by doing Kegels to prepare for birth, which is an interesting thing because if we think about the Kegel, that's a pelvic floor muscle contraction.
Yep.
Your pelvic floor's role is to just get out of the way. It needs to lengthen and get out of the way because your uterus is what is pushing the baby out. It is not your pelvic floor. So the important part for that is women in the later part of their pregnancy need to learn how to also lengthen and relax their pelvic floor to allow for baby to come out.
Interesting. So how would one go? It's like if you're listening, if you're like me right now and just did a Kegel because she said it, can't not do it.
Correct.
How do you get someone to relax and lengthen their pelvic floor?
Great question. So first is understanding like what is happening with your pelvic floor. So you said
I got no idea. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So you did a contraction. Yep. So the reverse of that is relaxing, right? So if you can contract.
How do you relax?
We don't know.
I sit down to drink a Red Bull. Like, what is that relaxing?
Yeah. I just sat down instead of standing up.
Yeah.
But if we're thinking through contract being the tightening, we need to also be able to access relaxing and lengthening. So intentionally feeling that on yourself, either using your hands to feel what does it feel like when I contract? What does it feel like to like push down and relax, bear down and relax? When you're preparing for having a baby, that's the only time you should be bearing down into your pelvic floor. You should not be pushing down when you're pooping. So
Gotcha.
The only time you should like be bearing down is baby.
Understood.
Yeah. So you should know how to lengthen. So that's part of it. And then also learning positions to be able to improve the mobility of your hips, your sacrum, and your back to prepare for having the baby. So being able to modify the ways in which the pelvis is moving to allow baby to engage.
Great.
Yeah. Super cool stuff.
You really know your stuff.
I hope so.
This is awesome.
It's fun.
And so like, there might be some men listening at this point. But how do men know if they're experiencing like pelvic floor issues or, what are some signs for men?
Great question. So there is a lot of like sexual dysfunction stuff that can go on that side too. So erectile dysfunction, that can be part of it. Painful orgasm. More you know.
That's not fun.
No. It would not be fun.
That's a buzzkill.
Right? Constipation, hemorrhoids. One that's kind of common is if you get in the bottom of a squat and you accidentally let out some gas. That means that hole is not closed off, right? So accidentally tooting at the bottom of a squat, that would be an indication. Again, pelvic pain. We see in cyclists pudendal neuralgia, which is one of the nerves that's down there. So like saddle pain basically from cycling.
Right.
Those would be some common guy ones.
Okay. Dudes. Check in with yourself.
Yeah, there's stuff.
See if any of those things are happening to you, for sure. When should someone seek professional help versus just doing exercises at home?
Great question. I think it also depends.
I know. Of course. I mean, literally everything is always, it depends because we don't want to, like, we're responsible people.
Yes.
And we don't want to give blanket advice.
Correct.
Right. There's very few times in all this stuff where this is when you do X.
Yeah.
Right. Because it always depends. So
Absolutely.
With the caveat of it depends what you think.
Okay. So when thinking through, let's start with like sexual dysfunction first. That's never normal. So that should be addressed. And when we're thinking through sexual dysfunction and pain, and this is true with our entire body, the longer that pain goes unresolved, then we start moving into this chronic pain, central sensitization stuff, which is a harder thing to unravel and treat than like acute pain.
Right.
So really, when it comes to like sexual dysfunction and sexual pain, that would warrant somebody seeking pelvic PT services.
And from what we said earlier, you're talking about like with ladies, that would be like immediate insertion and then deep penetration
and touch around the outside.
Outside. Okay.
Yep. And then they also can have pain with orgasm as well. So
if that's happening, go get checked.
Yes.
For sure.
Yep. And that can be also a combination of, again, referring to mental health providers if that's needed, because there is a fair amount of obviously play that goes in with mental health regarding sexual pain as well.
Yeah.
So if somebody is having that is, and potentially has, if they have like a history of trauma or anything, that is something that I'm considering, like I'm going to partner together with a provider. Physical therapy alone may not be enough. Mental health services may alone not be enough, right? We need to partner together.
Absolutely.
So that sign of sexual pain, yes, like please go see somebody that's not normal. In the early postpartum period, like very early on, again, some incontinence, some heaviness is to be expected. We've had that big stretch injury that we talked about.
300%.
300%. It's a number that's going to really jive with you now.
It's crazy.
It's a lot. So those tissues are lengthened. like a lot of them will naturally start to return to the length that they want to be. If you're continuing to have issues with that, or if they're so significant that it's impacting your daily life, like let's say you're not able to care for your kiddo because you have so much heaviness, or you have prolapse, or you can't leave the house because you're so scared that you're going to like empty your entire bladder, like that would say, like that's not something we need to just like wait and see if it gets better.
No, let's take action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say kind of like the severity of symptoms and the duration of time from birth. So for me, that's why I really advocate for women to get established with a good pelvic floor PT in pregnancy prior to having a baby, because there's a lot of stuff that we can kind of educate and train up on in that pregnancy time period.
Yeah, and especially with the education, just talking through all these things so that way you know, like, oh, this is happening. We talked about this.
Yep.
I'm not surprised by it.
100%.
Because the surprise and shock, and then you start second guessing yourself, and you're like, what is going on? Is this going to be forever? And then there goes the spiral.
100%. And then you're not sleeping. So you're like, I'm just going to sit here and think about how I'm always going to pee my pants for the rest of my life. So that is why I highly encourage, like, just like you should find other really quality providers prior to having a kid, like I think everybody should have a lactation consultant regardless of what your plan is.
Yeah.
But get established with those providers prior so that, again, you know the education piece bumping into it. And then if you're like one of those people that is having a higher burden of symptoms and you want treatment, then you've already established with somebody, and then you can be like 3 weeks postpartum, like, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Cool. We've established relationship with each other. I'm going to come see you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And are you one of those people that you can, establish that relationship during pregnancy?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah. And ideally, I mean, that's even prior to pregnancy, if somebody has pelvic health issues, like you don't have to have a baby to have pelvic health issues.
Right.
So I would encourage, if you're having any issues regarding that, like get established, but definitely in that like pregnancy time period, get a few visits, even if you're not having symptoms, just so you have that education moving into delivery and then also into the postpartum period, so that you're as best set up to be able to meet the goals that you want to achieve.
Awesome. Yeah, that's so important. That's really, really cool. Let's see, what other questions did I have? Anything? How can women prevent future pelvic floor problems?
Great question. I was going to say it depends.
It depends.
No. So I think, again, the value of strength training, right? Is a healthy body is a healthy pelvic floor. So getting the quality exercise in that you need to, maintaining healthy bathroom habits, so healthy bladder and bowel health. So making sure that you're not getting really constipated and pushing a lot, that you're doing a good job on potentially minimizing bladder irritants if you need to, like those sorts of things that from a modifiable lifestyle factor that you're doing those things. And then just recognizing that there are time periods in your life where you may have an increase in symptoms, knowing what those are and being able to advocate that you need treatment for those. So specifically for women, obviously you don't have to have a baby to have pelvic floor dysfunction, but we see a higher incidence of pelvic floor dysfunction in pregnancy and postpartum. And then we also see it increase again in menopause and postmenopausal women. So the estrogen state of women in postpartum, if they're breastfeeding, is pretty similar to somebody going through menopause.
Whoa.
Right?
Whoa.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to be a terrible human.
Yeah. Steer clear.
Right, yeah. Like, when I turn 51, don't come near my house. But knowing that these are some symptoms you could potentially experience, and knowing who to go for help on that again, even though it's common, it's not normal, and knowing that you can advocate for yourself, and that, again, as you transition into menopause, just because you're in menopause doesn't mean that you have to have painful and bad sex for the rest of your life.
Right.
So knowing who to go to, advocating for yourself, and finding a provider that you trust and is going to reach your goals.
Yeah, and training your glutes, obviously.
Yeah, and glutes forever.
Glutes forever. Glutes forever. Do your lunges, do your step-ups, do your squats, do your deadlifts. There we go. I love it. So let's focus a little bit more on you and aero physical therapy and aero therapy, and what can women expect during a pelvic floor session with you?
Great question. So starting off again, what is their goal, right? So what are they coming for? Understanding their medical history and their fitness history that they're bringing in to me. So if it's somebody that's like pregnant or postpartum, wanting to understand if there's any potential complications from either side of that. If it's somebody that's postpartum, what was their delivery experience like? How are they feeling about their delivery experience? Because that can be pretty complicated. Knowing how far out they are, if it's postpartum, from their delivery. how they're feeling about their recovery. Have they been doing other exercises? Those would be some kind of common questions that I would ask. After that point, one of the questions I commonly get is like, do I have to have an internal pelvic exam? And people are like kind of freaked out by that.
Yeah. Don't touch me.
Correct. And so the answer is you don't have to.
Oh, okay.
Right. And so there are situations where it could be helpful. There are situations where it's not needed. And so if it's a situation that seems like it might be helpful to do either an internal exam or an external visual exam where I am visualizing, but not actually touching, there's reasons for those. But if I don't think that there's a reason, I'm not going to do it,
right.
Obviously. If there's a reason and I explain it to the client and they decline wanting to do it, that's okay too, right?
Yeah, advocate for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is because there's so much education piece, I can use my lovely little model, show you what I want you to go do and assess, and then you report back to me. So if you're able to describe to me, hey, when I did this pelvic floor contraction, I actually saw my holes open. Okay, then that tells me we need to work on your coordination of understanding where is your pelvic floor going.
Right.
So we would go through potentially a pelvic floor exam if we needed to. And then we're also looking at, in general, where are you having symptoms if you're having symptoms? So if somebody's saying, I'm peeing when I'm in a deadlift, well, I want to see you do the movement, right? And then I'm going to assess your mobility, your strength, and your coordination throughout your body.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's
Love.
awesome. And then what's the best advice that you can give as a pelvic floor specialist? Like what's your top piece of advice?
One, you're not alone if you're dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction. So we talked about how common it was for women to struggle with pain with intimacy, but like 24 to close to 50% of women over 30 have some sort of urinary incontinence, which is really high.
It's very high.
It's very high, and it gets higher as we get older. So if you're experiencing it, you're not alone.
Yeah.
So taking away that shame part, but also saying, even though it's common, it's not normal. And so if that's something that's bothersome to you, there is help for you to get that addressed, and making sure that you're finding a provider who is partnering with you to meet your goals and gets you off of the table and off of laying on your back doing Kegels and doing the things that are causing and assessing the things that are causing your symptoms.
Yeah, doing a proper assessment.
Correct.
Rather than just, here's what we've done for years and nothing's getting better. So
Yeah.
we're still going to do it for some
Like
reason.
if you're only laying on the table doing clamshells and squeezing a dilator, like you probably need to find somebody different.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And I think we can end that one there. That's perfect. How do people get a hold of you?
Great question. So I'm not sure if you'll link my website.
I
but
will
he will
absolutely
link. Okay.
link your website.
Wonderful. So on my website, there's an ability to schedule on there. You also can reach out to me via my email, or my phone number is listed on there. So if you have specific questions that you want to see, hey, Margaret, do you treat this? Shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you or get on a phone call with you.
Amazing. Well, Dr. Margaret, thank you so much for spending time with the postpartum moms this morning at Yellow Rose, and then also with me. I learned a lot today, and I hope if you were listening or watching that you learned a lot as well. And yeah, this is really, really great. You got me all fired up.
Love. Thank you for
Fantastic.
having me.
Absolutely. Thank you. And, I never hit record. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. That'd be terrible.
That would be something special, wouldn't
Ready
it?
to run it back?